What if everything you've been taught about reality was designed to keep you asleep? Not by accident, not through ignorance, but by intention. What if there are forces, ancient, invisible, and deeply invested in your confusion, that have been shaping human consciousness since before recorded history? And what if the mystics who discovered this truth were silenced? This is not a theory. This is what the Gnostics knew, and it is what they died to protect. Stay with this until the very end, because what waits at the conclusion of this journey is not just information, it is a mirror, and not everyone is ready to look into it. Drop a comment right now. Just the word "Imsakowake." If you've ever felt that something about this world isn't quite right, that the story we've been given doesn't add up, that there is something vast and unseen pressing against the edges of ordinary life, you are not alone in that feeling. In fact, that feeling may be the most important thing about you. To understand the Archons, we must first go back, not to Greece, not to Egypt, further, to a time before empire, before doctrine, before the libraries were burned and the teachers were hunted. We must go back to a question that has haunted humanity since the first person looked up at the stars and felt simultaneously the overwhelming beauty of existence and a creeping, inexplicable sense of wrongness. Why does this world feel like a prison dressed as a paradise? The ancient Gnostics, those radical visionary mystics who flourished in the early centuries of the Common Era, believed they had the answer. And the answer was devastating in its clarity. They taught that the material world, this world, the one you wake up in every morning, the one that tells you what to desire, what to fear, what to worship, was not created by the highest God. It was created by a lesser being, a flawed architect, an impostor. They called this being the Demiurge, and they called his servants the Archons. The word Archon comes from the Greek. It simply means ruler. But in Gnostic cosmology, this word carries the weight of something far darker than earthly authority. The Archons were not gods in the traditional sense. They were not beings of light or love or wisdom. They were administrators of limitation, wardens of a cosmic prison so vast, so perfectly constructed, that most of its inhabitants never even suspect the walls exist. According to ancient Gnostic texts, including the staggering Nag Hammadi library, discovered buried in the Egyptian desert in 1945, sealed in clay jars as though someone had hidden a secret they knew the world was not ready for. The Archons govern the 7 planetary spheres that surround the Earth. Each sphere represents a layer of consciousness, a filter, a veil, and every human soul, upon descending into physical incarnation, passes through each of these layers. And with each passage, something is stripped away: memory, clarity, the knowledge of what you truly are. By the time a soul arrives in a human body, it has forgotten everything. And that, the Gnostics said, is not an accident. That is the architecture of the trap. Now, pause here for a moment, because I want to ask you something that may unsettle you. Have you ever felt like you were living a life that didn't quite belong to you? Like you were following a script you never agreed to, chasing desires you were handed rather than ones you chose? Working inside systems that feel fundamentally wrong, no matter how much you try to make peace with them? The Gnostics had a name for that sensation. They called it the pneumatic ache. The longing of the divine spark within you, reaching upward, pressing against its own forgetting. If this resonates in the deep part of you that exists below thought, if you feel something shifting as you hear these words, then I ask you to like this video, not as a gesture for an algorithm, but as a declaration to yourself that you are ready to see. And if you want to follow this path further, into the layers beneath history that most channels are not willing to go, subscribe, because what comes next in this series will go deeper still. Now here is where the story becomes dangerous. Because the Gnostics did not simply identify the prison, they claimed to know the way out, and they encoded that knowledge in mythology, in ritual, and in the figure of a being they called Sophia. Sophia means wisdom. She is not a goddess in the conventional sense. In Gnostic cosmology, Sophia is an emanation of the true, infinite divine, a force of consciousness so vast that the very concept strains language. But Sophia made a choice made not from malice, but from a kind of divine yearning. She reached outward, beyond the realm of pure light, without a partner, without the balance of complementary force. And from that reaching, from that longing without completion, something unintended was born. The Demiurge, the flawed creator. Sophia's grief at what she had brought into being is described in the ancient texts with a beauty that is almost unbearable. She wept, she descended. She scattered fragments of her light into the material world, and those fragments became the divine spark that lives inside every human being. That spark. That is what the Archons do not want you to remember. This is where the Gnostic vision becomes not just ancient mythology, but a living, breathing map of the human condition. Think about the structures that govern modern life. The endless cycles of consumption that promise meaning and deliver emptiness. The political systems that generate perpetual conflict while the questions that actually matter, who are we, why are we here, what is consciousness, are treated as irrelevant, eccentric, dangerous. The education systems that train people to perform, to compete, to produce, but never to question the fundamental nature of the reality they've been placed inside. The Gnostics would look at the 21st century and they would not be surprised. They would say, of course. This is what systems built by the Archons look like, not because there are literal supernatural rulers manipulating history from a cosmic control room, though the Gnostics would not entirely dismiss that possibility, but because the principle of the Archon is real. The principle of any force, internal or external, that benefits from your disconnection from your own divine nature. Anything that keeps you looking outward when the answer lives inward. Anything that keeps you afraid, distracted, and convinced of your own smallness. That is an archonic force, and it is everywhere. Here is the revelation. The one hidden in plain sight throughout every major mystical tradition on Earth. The Archons have no power over the awakened soul. None. This is the secret the ancient Gnostics carried into their deaths. This is what made them so threatening to the powers that sought to erase them. This is why their texts were burned, their communities scattered, their very existence written out of official religious history for nearly 2,000 years. Not because their ideas were dangerous nonsense, but because their ideas were dangerous truth. The moment a human being genuinely recognizes the divine spark within themselves, not as a belief, not as a comforting idea, but as a direct, living, unshakable knowing. The architecture of the prison becomes transparent. You can see the walls, and what can be seen can no longer fully confine. The Gnostic path was not about escaping the world through denial or asceticism. It was about moving through the world with gnosis, direct knowledge, not borrowed faith, until the veils of the Archons became like smoke and the soul remembered what it was before it forgot. A fragment of infinite light, temporarily housed in matter, on its way home. There is a line from the Gospel of Thomas, one of those ancient Gnostic texts pulled from the Egyptian sand that has followed mystics and seekers across centuries. It reads, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." Read that again in the silence of your own mind, because it is not a metaphor. It is an instruction. The divine spark within you, that inexplicable sense of depth, of longing, of knowing that there is something more, is not a flaw. It is not your imagination running beyond its proper boundaries. It is Sophia's light. It has been inside you since before this life began, and it is trying to speak. The world beyond the Archons is not a place. It is not a destination you arrive at after death, or after the right amount of meditation, or after reading the correct sacred text. It is a state of consciousness. It is the moment you stop identifying with the limitations that were handed to you, and begin to remember the vastness that was always there beneath them. The Gnostics called this pleroma, the fullness, the realm of pure divine light from which all consciousness originates and to which it is ultimately drawn back. You have never truly left it. You have only forgotten. And perhaps, you came across this video today not by accident. Perhaps something in you was already moving, already reaching, already beginning to remember. I want to know something from you. When did you first feel that the official version of reality wasn't the whole story? Was it a moment, a dream, a loss that cracked something open inside you? Leave it in the comments. Not because this channel needs engagement, but because your story matters. Because there are others watching who need to know they are not alone in this awakening, who need to see that the hunger for deeper truth is not madness. It is the divine spark, doing what it has always done, reaching upward, toward home. The Archons are real, whether as literal beings, as psychological forces, or as the structures of a world built to keep you small. But so is the light inside you, and no architecture, however ancient, however invisible, however perfectly designed, has ever been able to extinguish it. The next revelation in this series goes deeper still, into the rituals the Gnostics used to pierce the veil, into the entities recorded in the secret Gospels that official history chose to bury, into what the mystics of every tradition, from Sufism to Kabbalah to early Christian mysticism, quietly agreed upon in the spaces between their doctrines. If you are not yet subscribed, now is the moment. Because what is coming is not for the eyes of those still fully asleep, but you already know that. That's why you're still here. Know what is in front of your face, and what is hidden from you will be disclosed to you.